My mom, Susan, had a habit of sending me to get her shopping. However, she would always leave out a zero when paying me back what was owed, blaming on her poor eyesight. I never minded. In fact, I would just cover the cost without another word. Then, Summer, my sister, had to throw shade. Mom sends you money whenever she wants something. You never show us the actual costs, though I bet you're making a nice little profit off Mom behind our backs. Susan smiled and didn't even bother to defend me, as if confirming Summer's accusations. My heart sank. Over the years, I had bought her things from major appliances to the smallest groceries, and each time, the payment she sent was short. Susan would just brush the whole thing off by saying, "Oh, my eyes aren't what they used to be, my bad." I had poured hundreds of thousands into her expenses, only to end up with a reputation as a thief who cheated her own family. When Susan sent me money for the New Year's Eve catering, I simply booked food that fit the budget she paid for. An awkward silence hung over the room. The people at the dinner table simply stared at the food spread with a mix of emotions. I urged, "Don't just sit there, dig in." My mother, Susan Bridget, pulled a grimace, holding back an outburst only because others were present. Swallowing her rage, Susan asked, "Is this all of it? Push the waiting staff to hurry up and serve the rest." "This is everything," I replied indifferently before turning to the rest of the family. "Eat up before the food gets cold." Thud. Susan slammed her utensil down, her chest heaving. "We are a table of 12, and this is what you get us?" One family member uttered, "Macy, surely, this is a mistake. This isn't quite the New Year's Eve spread we usually have." In previous years, the family would have a feast with plenty of the finest seafood. This year, the table looked barren, set with only a small buffet. The only thing remotely close to a shellfish blowout was a measly shrimp cocktail. Of course, the family was confused. "No, that's no mistake," I shook my head. Infuriated, Susan pressed, "I gave you money to host the New Year's Eve party, and this is what you're serving everyone?" I glanced at the spread and sighed. "Well, this is the best I can do with the limited budget." My sister, Summer Fowler, said, her finger up my nose, "Who are you kidding? I know for a fact that Mom wired you $4,000 for the catering. I doubt there's even $500 worth of food here. Did you pocket the rest? I know that you're always finding excuses to buy things for Mom and overcharge her for the errands, but you've gone too far this time." Following the statement, the family gave me looks filled with judgment. Susan said, "Normally, I'd let this behavior slide. But it's not every day that we get to be together with family. Do you think this is appropriate?" My little cousin, Leon, started to throw a tantrum. "Dad, where's the crab? Didn't you say we'd be getting a seafood boil?" Aunt Tanya uttered accusingly, "Macy, this kind of behavior is beneath you. How can you do such a thing?" The rest of the family voiced their criticism. Susan jumped in. "That's enough of this fiasco. Go and fix this with the catering, and that'll be the end of the matter." Taking her cue, the other family members told me to keep the peace and restore the spread to its usual standard. However, I didn't budge it. I replied curtly, "That's not happening." "What do you mean by that?" Susan raised her voice. I turned to her. "Have you forgotten, Mom? You only sent me $400, and this is the food all that money could buy." I ended up paying the extra out of pocket since the food was a bit out of budget. Panic fleeted across Susan's face as she hadn't expected me to call her out. Nevertheless, she was quick to cover her tracks. Clearing her throat, Susan kept cutting her eyes at me. "What are you talking about? I sent you $4,000. Summer mocked, "Oh, just give it up. I was there when Mom called you. She told you that the budget was $4,000. How can you claim that you got $400? That's quite a ridiculous cut you're giving yourself." With Summer backing Susan up, the family members' disdain for me grew. Uncle Sam said furiously, "Macy, how could you steal from your own mother?" Faced with their skepticism, I pulled up the transaction record. "See for yourselves. Mom transferred $400. It was true that Susan called me to give me the budget for the New Year's Eve party. However, when the money came, it was only $400. It was Susan's go-to MO. She'd played dumb so long as I kept quiet. The moment I spoke up, she'd blame her eyesight for being off by a digit. Then came the guilt trip. "So I fell short on the funds? Do you need to go out of your way to point that out? After all the years I've cared for you, must you get upset over a bit of money? You're nothing like your sister. You are a thankless brat." Sitting next to me, Tanya glanced at my phone before looking up and uttering, "Oh, it is just $400, Susan." Susan let out a strange chuckle in embarrassment. "My eyesight isn't what it used to be. I must have missed a zero." She glared at me. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Susan reluctantly transferred me the rest of the funds, her voice stiff when she said, "There you go. You have the money now. Get us a decent spread. Don't keep everybody waiting." Before I could get a word in, Summer beat me to it. "What are you doing, Mom?" She sneered at me and said out loud, "I'm sure you've skimmed a fortune off Mom by now. So what if she's short one time? Can't you just cover the difference for once? Are you shaming Mom in front of family because you didn't get anything out of her?" Susan gave her a pouting look. Don't say such things when we have family around. Her supposed criticism was simply confirmation that I was a thief. I paused for a moment before refunding her the money. I uttered callously, in that case, you can have the money back. You can fix this with catering, so I don't get blamed for taking a cut. The look on Susan's face froze. She knew that the bill for the usual feast would cost over $10,000. Susan was one to keep up with appearances before the family. Since her marriage didn't work out, she sought fulfillment elsewhere. Every year, Susan would host a lavish New Year's Eve party to show the family that she was thriving. In the past, I'd cover the extra costs out of my own pocket to stroke Susan's ego, but I was done now. Summer rolled her eyes and clicked her tongue. Oh, don't act like you're the saint. Since you're talking about returning the money, don't stop at today's. You should pay Mom back every penny you stole from her. There's no better time than today with the family here. Let's do the math and see how much you've taken so far. Susan pulled a face. She grabbed Summer's hand. We shouldn't be talking about money at a family get-together. This is a matter behind closed doors. No, I want to settle this right now. Summer jerked her arm away from Susan violently. She yelled, her eyes welling up, I know what's going on. You asked Macy to run errands to sneak her money. I'm your daughter too. Why are you playing favorites? We should put everything on the table in front of everyone. Exactly how much have you given her? I expect the same, down to the last penny. Everything became clear to me when I saw the begrudging look on Summer's face. She wasn't blowing the whole thing out of proportion to stand up for Susan. It was all jealousy on her part, as she believed Susan had been secretly giving me financial support. Summer was kicking up a fuss to claim back what was rightfully hers. Sam came to Summer's defense. Susan, you always claim to be fair to both your daughters. Why are you favoring Macy? You have my support, Summer. You should fight for your rights. The rest of the family sided with Summer as well. Her well-being was the last thing on their minds, but they weren't about to miss a front-row seat to the family drama. Color drained from Susan's face. Susan squeezed a smile. Don't encourage Summer. You all know me. I've always been fair to my children. I'll tell catering to get us more food. Susan rose to her feet to leave the room. Summer stopped her, her arms spread apart. Are you trying to run away? Why are you scared? Susan chuckled awkwardly. I swapped my phone recently and lost all my phone data. I don't have the chat logs anymore. There's no way to check the transactions even if I wanted to. Tell you what, I'll send you 20 grand. Summer cut Susan off with a smirk. Don't try to shut me up with just 20 grand. I bet you funneled much more than that into Macy's pockets. Besides, it's not about the money. I just want justice. With her words striking hard, Sam's wife, Kendra, led the applause. Atta girl. Speak up about all the hurt. We got your back. Looking thrilled, Kendra held her phone up to capture the spectacle. She was an influencer with around 20,000 followers on a real platform. It took me a second to catch on to what Kendra was trying to do. Sure enough, I checked Kendra's social media handle using my alternative account and found that she was live. Nevertheless, she had only a handful of viewers so far. Displeased with the low viewer count, Kendra egged the other family members on to stir up more drama. With the family behind her, Summer straightened her back and felt assured. She spoke aloud. You talk about being fair to both of us, but in truth, you favor Macy in secret. Do you think I'm blind? Today, I'm finally standing up for myself. Susan looked at me pleadingly, expecting me to step in and intervene. I sighed to myself. Though Susan's behavior let me down, this was ultimately a private family matter. It was one thing to air our dirty laundry in front of family, but the stakes had shifted now that Kendra was live streaming the conflict. With Kendra and the family stirring the pot, the live broadcast viewer count shot up. I refused to let our family matters be her clickbait or allow strangers who knew nothing to comment. Hence, I interrupted Summer abruptly. We'll talk at home for now, let's just enjoy dinner. I gave her a look, but the message went over Summer's head. She scoffed. As a vested party, you have no say here. Am I wrong to ask to be treated fairly? You and Mom are going to deny the favoritism back home anyway, so it's in my best interest to get answers right here, right now. Susan's grimace grew as Summer refused to relent. Struck by a thought, Susan got a grip on herself. She looked up and met my gaze. Macy, it's unfair to Summer that I bankrolled you by having you run errands for me. Taken aback, I was ready to question her claim when Susan went on. The transaction records are gone. It's hard to keep track of the different bills anyway. But I reckon I have financed you to the tune of $200,000 throughout the years. Why don't you just pay Summer $100,000, and we'll call it a day? Having said her piece, Susan turned to Summer for her 2 cents. After much internal deliberation, Summer gave in with a nod. Fine, I guess. As it turned out, Summer held out on the 20 grand proposal because the payout wasn't to her expectations. Susan shifted her gaze to me, gesturing for me to wire Summer the funds. With her reputation on the line, Susan made me take responsibility for something that never happened and demanded that I transfer money to Summer. I smirked in rage. Rolling her eyes, Summer urged, well, don't just stand there, send the money already. I locked eyes with Susan. You claimed that I've pocketed over $200,000 in supposed commissions from running errands for you. Show me the proof. Susan looked away. Like I told you, the chat logs are long gone. How am I supposed to show you? She murmured in my ear, just transfer Summer the money. Don't start a family drama over the holidays, or the family is going to have a field day. I'll clear the air with Summer back home later. She'll return the money then. Susan expected me to cave in like I did before when she allegedly paid me the wrong amount by mistake. However, I stood firm on my ground for once, not taking the fall because she told me so. If I were to let this slide, the family, as well as the viewers on the livestream, would assume that I had been skimming money off my own mother. By then, my explanation would fall on deaf ears, plus, I'd be out of $100,000 for nothing. I raised a brow. How can you claim that I profited the difference then? Since the viewers had no idea what was going on, Kendra typed away to keep them in the loop. After getting the context, the viewers were convinced that I had been scamming my own mother by overblowing the price tag when purchasing things. I glanced down at Kendra's phone. Her screen was a blur of insults directed at me by the viewers. Summer slammed the table and shrieked, Mom owned up to it. Why are you still stubborn? Are you denying the whole thing because Mom said that her phone data is lost? The other family members persuaded me to cough the money up. Macy, blood is thicker than water. Don't let a bit of money come between you and your sister. I uttered curtly, it never happened. There's no way I'm sending her money. Summer's eyes welled up. Then came a slap across my face. Susan struck me, leaving my cheek numb. She tore into me, her finger up my nose. You're so selfish. Summer is trying to be nice by putting the whole fiasco to rest for just $100,000. But you care more about money than family. My heart sank. All right, then didn't Summer assert that I pocketed the difference when shopping for things on your behalf? We can go through the numbers. If I really did profit, I'll return the amount in full. Summer scoffed in disdain. Wow, aren't you a saint? The chat logs are lost. How are we supposed to check the transactions? I waved my phone. That's fine. Mom doesn't have the data records, but I do. Susan went white in the face. Before I could pull up our chat history, Susan snatched the phone out of my hands amid my distraction and smashed it onto the floor. I'd rather keep the transactions private because this argument over money between sisters is getting out of hand. Macy, you have no appreciation for what I'm trying to do here. You've gained a lot more than Summer, yet you're clutching to your purse, refusing to share even a dime with her. I'm so disappointed in you. Given Susan's expression and tone, I would have been taken in if I hadn't known the truth. I retrieved the phone with the cracked screen from the ground. It wouldn't turn on at all. Susan silently let out a sigh of relief. She seemed to think that I couldn't verify the numbers on my damaged phone. Calm and collected, I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag. Susan's face turned to one of terror when her eyes fell on the documents. The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. It was a stark contrast to the buzzing of notifications coming from Kendra's phone. Susan stared at the stack of papers in my hand as if they were radioactive. Her mouth opened, then closed, resembling a fish gasping for air. What is that? Summer asked, her voice shrill but wavering. She looked between me and Mom, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. I call it my sanity folder, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I slapped the stack onto the table, right next to the sad, solitary shrimp cocktail. You see, Mom, I learned a long time ago that you have a selective memory, and since you just smashed my phone, which, by the way, is destruction of property, I'm glad I stopped by the bank and the print shop on my way here. Macy, put that away, Susan hissed, her face contorted. This is a party. You are embarrassing the family. No, Susan, I said, dropping the mom entirely. You embarrassed the family when you lied about giving me $200,000. You embarrassed the family when you slapped me. I looked at Kendra. Is the stream still running, Kendra? Kendra, who usually thrived on gossip but looked a bit stunned by the physical violence, nodded slowly. Yeah, 3,000 viewers. They want to see the papers. Good, I said. I picked up the top sheet. Exhibit A. November 14th. You asked me to buy a new washing machine because yours flooded the basement. You told Summer it cost you $200. I held up the bank transfer receipt. You wired me $12,000. I flipped the page. Here's the invoice from Best Buy. I paid $89,999 out of my own pocket to cover the rest because you cried about wet socks and being unable to do laundry. Summer snatched the paper from the table. She squinted at it, reading the lines. Wait, Mom sent $120? But... Mom, you told me you sent her extra for the hassle. Susan was sweating now. Her foundation was starting to crease in the lines of her forehead. It was a typo. I told you, my eyes. Okay, I continued, flipping to the next page. Exhibit B. Aunt Tanya's birthday gift. The designer handbag. You told the whole family you bought it for her. You sent me to get it. Tanya looked up, clutching her Prada bag. Macy bought this? I bought it, I confirmed. Cost, $2,400. Money received from Susan, $2,400. A gasp went around the table. $24? Uncle Sam repeated. For a Prada bag? She said she missed 2 zeros that time. I said dryly she'd promised to wire the rest next week. That was 3 years ago. Lies. Susan shrieked. She lunged for the papers, her manicured nails clawing at the table runner. I pulled the stack back easily. I have 5 years of bank statements here, Susan highlights, printed in color every single time you asked me to buy something. The incoming transfer was missing a zero every single time statistically. That's not bad eyesight, that's a strategy. Summer looked at the papers in her hand, then at Susan. The gears were turning. If I hadn't been skimming money, if I had actually been subsidizing Susan's lifestyle. Mom, Summer said, her voice dropping an octave. Where is the money? Susan froze. What? If you didn't give Macy the 200 grand and you didn't pay for the bag, or the washer, or the catering, but you told me you withdrew that money from Dad's insurance payout. Summer's eyes went wide. Where is the money, Mom? The question hung in the air, heavier than the earlier silence. Susan straightened her dress, attempting to regain her composure. I don't have to answer to you. I am your mother. I have expenses. Managing a household is expensive. You don't have a mortgage, I pointed out. Dad paid it off before he died. Utilities. Taxes. Maintenance. Susan blustered. Kendra, I said, turning to the influencer. What are the comments saying? Kendra looked down at her screen, her eyes widening. User Forensic Files fan says, classic narcissist financial abuse. User T-Spiller 2024 says, check her gambling debts. And, whoa, someone named Bingo Queen _69 just commented, Susan. Are you at dinner? You still owe me $5,000 from the slot tournament last Tuesday. Susan's face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost. Gambling? Aunt Tanya whispered. Susan, you said you were going to Bible study on Tuesdays. Susan stammered. Bible study at the Hard Rock Casino? I asked. Summer stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Susan with the ferocity of a starving wolf realizing its prey was injured. You told me you were saving my inheritance, Summer said, her voice trembling with rage. You told me the reason you couldn't help me with my down payment was because the market was down. You told me you gave Macy money to help her out because she was struggling, and that's why you couldn't give me any. I did help her. Susan lied, desperate. Macy just proved she's been paying for your life. Summer screamed. You lied to me. You pit us against each other so I wouldn't ask where the money went. It was a beautiful moment of clarity. Summer wasn't angry that Susan was a bad person. She was angry that the gravy train she thought was waiting for her at the station had been derailed years ago. Summer, honey, don't listen to her, Susan pleaded, reaching out. Macy forged those papers. You know she's good with computers. She has bank stamps on them, Mom. Summer threw the paper at Susan. It's Wells Fargo official letterhead. The live stream was going wild. Kendra was no longer just a participant. She was a war correspondent. Guys, we are at 15K viewers. This is trending. Turn that off. Susan screamed at Kendra. Turn it off or I will sue you. Sue me with what money? Kendra retorted, emboldened by her rising viewer count. The $24 you used to buy the Prada bag? The room erupted. Uncle Sam was shouting at Susan about a loan he'd given her last year. Aunt Tanya was inspecting her handbag, wondering if it was a knockoff. It wasn't. I paid full price. Leon was crying because he still hadn't gotten his crab. I stood there, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. The anchor I had been dragging around for a decade had just snapped. I'm leaving, I announced. You can't leave. Susan yelled. You have to fix this. The catering. I don't have to do anything, I said. I booked what you paid for $400 worth of shrimp and finger sandwiches. Enjoy. Macy. Summer grabbed my arm. You can't just go. We need to figure out how much she actually has left. You're good with numbers. I looked at my sister's hand on my arm. For years, I craved this, her needing me, her acknowledging my competence. Now, it just felt pathetic. No, Summer, I said, peeling her fingers off me. I'm not the accountant anymore. I'm not the bank, and I'm certainly not the punching bag. I reached into my purse and pulled out a bill. Here, I said, tossing a crumpled $20 bill onto the table. For my share of the shrimp. Keep the change. I walked out of the house into the crisp New Year's Eve air. The cold felt like a cleansing fire. I didn't even look back when the shouting inside escalated to the point where I heard glass breaking, likely Susan throwing a vase in a tantrum. I got into my car, plugged in my backup phone, an old iPhone I kept in the glove box, and saw the notifications flooding in. Kendra's stream had been clipped and shared on TikTok. The video of Susan slapping me and then me dropping the receipts was already viral. #ReceiptQueen was trending. I drove to a diner 3 towns over. I ordered a steak, a loaded baked potato, and a glass of cheap red wine. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. But the night wasn't over. Around 11:30 p.m., my backup phone buzzed. It was a text from Uncle Sam. Macy police are here. Mom called them on. Summer, it's a mess. You need to come back. I took a bite of my steak. I chewed slowly. I swallowed. I typed back, new phone, who dis? Then I blocked the number. I spent the countdown to midnight alone in a booth, watching the ball drop on the diner TV. When the clock struck 12, I raised my glass to the waitress. Happy New Year, she smiled. You have no idea, I replied. The first week of January was a blur of silence and noise. Silence from me, noise from the world. Kendra's video had hit 4 million views. The internet detectives had gone to work. They found Susan's public Facebook posts where she bragged about blessings and vacations, cross-referencing them with the dates on my bank statements shown in the high-res screenshots of the stream. The verdict was unanimous. Susan was a grifter, and I was the saint who put up with it too long. I hired a lawyer on January 3rd not to sue them, but to protect myself I sent a cease and desist letter to Susan regarding any further contact, and a formal demand for the $800 replacement cost of my smashed phone. It was petty. I loved it. On January 5th, Summer showed up at my apartment complex. She couldn't get in the main gate, so she stood by the intercom, buzzing repeatedly. I watched her on the security camera. She looked tired. Her perfect hair was messy. I pressed the talk button. Go away, Summer. Macy, please, she sobbed into the speaker. She kicked me out. She said I turned the family against her. I have nowhere to go. You have a job, Summer. Get a hotel. I don't have any money, she wailed. I lent Mom $5,000 last month for investments because she promised to double it by New Year's. I'm broke. I felt a twinge of pity, just a twinge. It was small, like a paper cut. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. Maybe you should have asked for receipts. Macy. She's selling the house. She's selling everything and moving to Florida with some guy she met online. That made me pause. The house was the only asset left. If she sold it, any chance of Summer or anyone else getting their money back was gone. Not my circus, not my monkeys, I whispered to myself. Macy, please. I'm sorry. I know I was a bitch. I wanted her to love me like she seemed to love you. I thought she was giving you money because you were the favorite. She didn't love anyone, Summer, I said into the intercom. She loved my wallet and she loved your adoration. She used us both. Summer slumped against the brick wall. I know that now. Please, Macy, just let me sleep on the couch one night. I looked at the monitor. She looked broken. One night, I said, and you pay me $50 for the night up front. Okay. I buzzed her and I wasn't a doormat anymore, but I wasn't a monster. Summer stayed for 3 days. She paid me. She also cleaned my apartment obsessively, likely out of nervous energy. We pieced together the rest of the story through family gossip channels, mostly Aunt Tanya, who had flipped sides faster than a pancake. Susan was indeed trying to sell the house, but there was a snag. Dad had put the house in a trust. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, while Summer scrubbed the baseboards. Wait, Summer said, looking up the trust. I thought Mom dissolved that years ago. She told us she did, I said, remembering the paperwork Dad had shown me when I was 18, but to dissolve it, she needed both of our signatures as beneficiaries. I never signed anything. I certainly didn't, Summer said. I smiled a slow, predatory smile. Then she can't sell the house, I said. In fact, if she's been borrowing against the equity, she might have committed fraud. I called my lawyer. 2 days later, we froze the sale. The meltdown Susan had was apparently legendary. She went live on Facebook, trying to copy Kendra's success, crying about how her ungrateful daughters were trying to make her homeless. The internet roasted her. The top comment was, maybe if you didn't spend $24 on a Prada bag, you'd have savings. We didn't see Susan until the court mediation in February. She looked older. The stress of the internet fame and the financial freeze had taken a toll. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, she was wearing sweatpants. When we walked into the conference room, she glared at me. Are you happy? She spat. You ruined my life. You ruined your own life, I replied calmly, sitting down next to my lawyer. We're just here to audit the trust. The audit was a bloodbath. Susan had forged signatures to take out home equity lines of credit. She had drained the emergency maintenance funds. She had essentially stripped the house of all value, leaving a shell of debt. It's gone, the forensic accountant said, looking over his glasses. All of it. The gambling debts are substantial. Summer put her head in her hands. So there's no inheritance, nothing. Technically, my lawyer said, since she forged her signatures, the debt is hers, not the trust's. However, the house will likely have to be sold to satisfy the creditors, or foreclosed on. She goes to jail though, right? Summer asked, her voice hard. Susan gasped. You would send your own mother to jail? For forgery and fraud? Summer looked at her. You let me believe Macy was a thief for years. You let me treat my sister like garbage because I thought she was stealing my money. You destroyed our relationship for money. Susan looked at me, expecting me to soften. Macy, surely you. I just want my name off the loans, I said. I don't care if you go to jail or Florida, just get out of my financial life. 6 months later. The house was sold. The proceeds went to pay off the bank. Susan avoided jail time by pleading guilty to a lesser charge and agreeing to a payment plan that she would never actually fulfill. She moved into a small apartment in a neighboring town, funded by her Social Security checks. We didn't talk. Summer and I were, okay, we weren't best friends. Years of resentment don't vanish overnight, but we met for coffee once a week. We split the bill down to the penny. It was our little inside joke. I had started a blog called The Receipt Keeper, giving financial advice to people dealing with financially abusive family members. It was surprisingly popular. I even had a merch line of notebooks that said, show me the receipts. On a warm July evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. Hello? Macy? It was Susan. Her voice sounded frail, shaky. Hi, Susan, I said, my guard instantly up. I'm at the grocery store. She said I'm trying to buy a birthday cake for myself. Today is my birthday. I know, I said happy birthday. The card declined, she whispered. I must have forgotten to transfer the funds. My eyes, I can't see the app very well. Old habits die hard. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. It's only $20, Macy. Surely, after everything, you can spare $20? For your mother? On her birthday? I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. I had a fully funded savings account. I had a sister who respected me. I had peace. I can't do that, Susan, I said. Why not? She cried. You're rich now. You have that blog. I don't carry cash, I lied. In my banking app. Well, my eyesight isn't what it used to be. I might miss a zero and send you $2 by mistake. There was a silence on the other end. You're a cruel girl, she hissed. No, I said, ending the call. I'm just paid up. I blocked the number. Summer was coming over for dinner. We were having seafood. A massive, expensive, delicious seafood boil with extra crab. I went back into the kitchen, checked the pot, and smiled. Everything was exactly as it should be. The books were balanced.